Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of A Mic on the Podium with me, Michael Seal. Today, I conduct a conversation with a Finnish conductor who also started his musical life as a violinist, but after studying with both Jorma Panala and Leif Segerstam, he's gone on to have a truly international career, holding title positions in Japan, Germany, South Korea, and New Zealand. It's a great pleasure to welcome Pietari Inkinen. Pietari, how are you? Very good to meet you and to see you and to chat with you today.
I'm very well. Nice to meet you too.
And where are you in the world?
I live in Switzerland these days, over 10 years now, and I'm home in Basel at the moment.
Very, very nice. Nice place to live. The reason for asking is obviously later on we'll be talking about, well, the 3/4 places that you regularly go to conduct and travelling, but I thought I'd double check to see where you were. On the podcast, I always go right back to the beginning. And I know from reading Wikipedia, which of course is so true and often full of facts, he lied, that you studied the violin and piano and you started at the age of 4. So did you come from a musical family?
Musical family, yes. Professionals, no.
Okay.
So we have some further back in the family, some church musicians have been there, but mostly hobby musicians. Let's put it like that.
Yes.
So music was around, but mainly as hobby amongst many other things. And then one by one, the other hobbies, for a reason or another, tended to drop out, and I was then left with the violin and football that I was also very interested in. And then both became rather serious, and then there was just not enough time. And that final decision had to be made.
Is it a decision? I mean, I know we love what we do, and we're very lucky as conductors that we do what we do. But is there any part of you, for instance, I was quite a talented cricketer when I was a young, and I had a trial for my county when I was 16. I didn't get through, and I wasn't good enough. Part of me wishes I'd tried it a bit harder. Is there anything in your mind that wishes you tried football?
I don't think so, really. I still enjoy watching it, and when there happens to be a match on a free evening in San Siro or somewhere else, I tend to go still, and I enjoy that.
Yeah.
Knowing it also rather closely, what are the things to really appreciate there. And then a couple of years ago in Torino, I saw then finally Ronaldo play and in Champions League game, and he did some amazing things. And it's nice to, like in music, the more you know, more you can even appreciate the fine things. It's the same in football.
Absolutely true. I didn't ask because I didn't know, or maybe I didn't notice when I looked at the Wikipedia. Which part of Finland are you from?
Kouvola, southeast,
yes.
rather close to the Russian border.
Okay.
Especially the current border. In the past, it used to be further away, but we lost some of it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh dear.
My city is very close.
Yeah. Well, we won't linger on that, given current events,
right?
And all of that. The reason why I asked was because at some point, Wikipedia mentions that you started or were in a rock band. How long was that for? And is there anything of your days in your rock band that you look back on now as a conductor and use?
Yeah, I mean, that was during the school time, from the 5th to the 9th grade.
Yeah.
When we used to provide the music in the school discos and stuff like that.
Brilliant.
And I mean, it was fun too. I don't know. The good question. I mean, somehow all of these things runs its course, and that was clearly enough for me of that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's fair enough. I mean, I was into pop music a little bit when I was a teenager, but eventually classical music took over. You go to the Sibelius Academy in Helsinki, and you graduate in 2003 as a violinist, and then 2 years later as a conductor. Now we've got to conducting, which is the important thing and the reason for the whole podcast. Who was teaching at the Sibelius Academy in 03 to 05? And was it something that you'd thought about doing all along, or was it something that came into your mind when you joined the Sibelius Academy?
I mean, I started in Sibelius Academy Youth Department with the fiddle already at 11 years old or so. And a couple years later, that time Jorma Panula, our guru professor,
yes,
was the professor in Sibelius Academy, and he started an experimental class.
Mm.
So he just wrote a little, typical his style, he used to have like a tiny pencil in his pocket, and he scribbled on a tiny piece of paper, whoever from the youth department kids want to try conducting next Saturday with Haydn Symphony number, I don't remember anymore.
Yeah.
Go up with the score to the concert hall. And I went, and well, I don't, some 20 kids there or so with the conducting class orchestra present, and off we go, one at a time. He was there with the camera. Of course, we knew pretty much nothing, but it was just somehow, he had a good eye to choose the right students, I think.
Yeah.
So it was checking sort of a sure musicality too, but the right kind of personality who might survive this job.
Mm.
And so he took 3 of us as kind of a youth students. So not officially in the conducting class, obviously, but like an experimental program, and that's how it all started. However, the violin was always, I was very, very keen on the instrument since very early on, and to master that to the highest level. I mean, I won the national violin competition, got 4th prize in the Sibelius competition, and played a lot of solo things. To bring it to that level, of course, has to be done first, and that's why I went in between to Cologne, Zakhar Bron, Vadim Repins and Maxim Vengeros, and many others teacher. And I played for Vadim when I was 15 in a masterclass, and Vadim said that you should go to Bron. I'll give him a call now.
Mm.
And that's I had this couple years in Germany, and that was really the time to be in this environment with such a amazing talents, fiddle talents. And I mean, of course, Maxim and Vadim, they are a bit older, they were already gone, but that's how that happened. And after these competitions and playing quite a lot of concerts, then somehow always that was in the back of the mind. At one point, I would like to take further steps in the conducting. And I said to Bron that I'm gonna apply. It's very difficult to get in. Sometimes they didn't take anybody, sometimes 1, sometimes 2, sometimes so forth. Now the program has changed, I think, a bit. Shorter programs, and they get more people in. But at our time, it was quite tricky, even trickier to get in. I said it's not guaranteed at all. So, but if I get in, I'm gonna have to move back to Finland. And we sort of made a deal. And if I don't, I stay and we do a few more competitions and everybody else. And luckily I got in, and that was it. Then I called Bron, and I'm going starting next autumn. And already I went into the proper class, and Leif Segerstam was the professor. Then Jorma Panula had already retired.
Yeah.
And I spent more or less 1 season in the class properly, and the second season already there came a cancellation with the Helsinki Philharmonic, with whom I already knew very well. I played several times as a soloist there, so it was kind of a very natural thing. Segerstam said, "And you do it."
Yeah,
it was a complicated program. Walton Symphony, Arnold Overture, and the Elgar Cello Concerto. The orchestra never played the Walton, and it was in a way not an autopilot thing to do.
Not in the slightest.
Learn in a very short time, and that's how it all then started.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, I mean, are you saying that it was the Walton's first symphony? Well, frankly, the second symphony.
Walton.
I mean, that's a piece I did quite early on in my conducting life, and it pops up regularly because I love it. But by God, is it difficult to put together?
Yeah.
And especially if an orchestra doesn't know it, it's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Wow, what a big jump in.
Yeah, and I mean the story. If you want to hear even more details, it's actually quite interesting. It was the intendant at the time, the orchestra manager. She called me that, I mean, Leif has obviously had said that, okay, you should do it. And she called me that, the conductor is ill. He has traveled from America. He's in the hotel in Heathrow or something, very unwell. He's not able to travel further. So can I bring you the Walton score? Like, this is like the night before.
Yeah.
To study, just to run it, because the orchestra has to rehearse it. Nobody knows it. And then I said, yeah, great. So I studied the whole night and put my markings down and go to the orchestra. Hi, nice to see you guys. Here we go. Let's. At the end of the day, it went fine. I was lucky. They offered already 4 months later. They still had an open slot. So after the first rehearsal, they offered, would you like to do that? It's going well. Sure. Thank you. Great. Let's see you then in February. This was now in November. And I take my markings out or go back home. She calls like a couple hours later. He just had doctor saw him. He's really unwell. He certainly still cannot travel. Can I bring the score back to you? And could you look at the overture, please? Tam O'Shanta, Malcolm.
Tam O'Shanta, yes, wonderful piece. Yeah.
So then she came back, dropped the scores to me. I put my markings back in. Study quickly the Arnold's that I can somehow run it in the rehearsal. Also, it was quite a tricky handwritten score. I mean, big score, and I still remember that very clearly. It's more than 20 years ago now. But anyway, so I go second day, rehearse things. Hi guys, nice to see you again. Let's have a look at the overture as well. And at the end, okay, good luck tomorrow for the general and concert. And then same story again, leave the scores behind, go back home. And she calls again like half an hour later. No, where can I bring the Elgar cello concerto? He's not coming. Yeah, just got home, the whole lot back off. And so it was, quite a special week.
Yeah.
And that's how it all started, really.
Well, I have to point out for the non-conducting or even non-playing listeners, of which I'm sure there are quite a few, that's a tricky program to put together.
It was a risky thing to do.
Yeah.
It was all about, Leif was teaching that week. He was in Helsinki. He was at the time chief conductor of the orchestra. He could have taken over. But this is also part of the Finnish tradition that, you really give chances. And that was very clearly his decision. You can do it. This is your chance, now go. Then we will pass that on, and we do pass that on, in those similar situations to the next ones, And
well, I love that Finnish tradition, and I think I benefited from it when I started conducting, and Sakari Oramo was the music director in Birmingham. That basically he came to watch me rehearse an amateur orchestra. Funnily enough, it was Walton's first symphony, and he watched me rehearse the second and third movement with an amateur orchestra.
Yeah.
And I think his attitude was, give the guy a go. Now, I was a member of the orchestra, and in the UK, frankly, when one of your own stands in front of the orchestra conducts, it's not looked upon well. It's almost frowned upon. I know some people who run other orchestras have said, oh my God, that would never happen here. But Sakari's answer was, give him a go. If he's got talent, why can't we use him? And I think that really is the Finnish attitude, and it's one I applaud, and it's one that later on the CBSO did with a young conductor called Alpes Chohan, who was in the youth orchestra, and we gave him some time to, absorb what the orchestra was saying, gave him some little bits of work here and there, and he's now gone on to have a flourishing international career. And I think, stopping that or repressing it is terrible. I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah, you just have to have the right opportunities at the right time. But a lot of talented people don't get any opportunity at any time. And and this so many things you cannot learn in the class.
Yes.
I mean, the conducting class orchestra in Helsinki, it is like a simulator. You can crash, but you don't die.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can really try the tricky things for the first time. And that's with an orchestra who also, they can play the instruments, but they don't know the repertoire. They can't. Yeah. So this is the right level situation, the best situation for a young conductor to learn. But then you have to take next steps. You have to learn how to deal with the rehearsals and plan the rehearsal, how to make the whole week work. And this you absolutely cannot learn in the class.
No, absolutely. Before we leave your studies, I'm going to ask, on the podcast, the teaching of Leif Segerstam has come up many times before. Dalia Stasevska, a couple of other people have been taught by Leif. Jorma Panela has come up often before. Right. I was taught by him for 2 weeks. I remember it very, very, very well. I wonder whether you could tell me, because obviously this is a conducting podcast, but Zachar Bron is such a big name in the violin world. I wonder, could you tell me what his reaction was when you got into the class? And were there anything from a teacher of that stature that you take now as a conductor and think, well, actually, just those principles work from Zachar Bron?
What was Bron's reaction? Yeah, I mean, I called him immediately as promised. And he was like, if I remember correctly, he was like, I mean, not surprised. He was kind of quiet a little bit and in a way, a little bit disappointed. But then immediately, yes, that was the deal. That's what we agreed. And I have to go. And since then, every year I play with his, from the most famous students to the younger ones, and we just did a couple years ago his 70th birthday concert with the whole spectrum of his different generation of his pupils, and it's still remained sort of a family. And like with Repin, we really play. It's a nice circle closing that he really kicked this route for me, and now we played more or less every season together and so forth. So it's quite a special family, I would say. And sure, when you have a fiddler soloists and or people who have come through the same system, many memories, and some of his trademark musical things even somehow in certain repertoire especially stick through even from these players, and nice memories, I would say.
Yeah. Well, you go out into the big wide world. I would imagine, just on a personal note, that it would have been probably towards the end of Zachari's time, so 07 or 08, I remember playing for you. You came to the CBSO when I was in the CBSO. I was there for 22 years. You may or may not know that. And I have a vague little bell telling me that you came and for the first time and conducted Sibelius' first symphony. Would I be right?
That kind of detail about repertoire, I'm not quite sure. Possible.
Yeah,
possible.
But I remember you coming, and of course, those are the first steps.
Yeah.
But not long into your journey into the world of conducting, you become music director of the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, and have since gone on to become honorary conductor. Now, I'm going to throw some dates out for the listeners because it's going to end up in quite an important question. You do that job until 2015, and then in 2016 you become chief conductor of the Japan Philharmonic, where you're still the chief conductor. In between, you do 2 years at the Ludwigsburg Schloss Festspiele, which is that's a mouthful.
Good pronunciation.
Well, I'm better at German than I am at Finnish, as we ascertained before we started. And then chief conductor for 5 years of the Prague Symphony Orchestra between 2015 and 20. But then from 17 onwards, chief of the Deutsche Radio Philharmonie. And from January this year, you've become music director of the KBS Symphony Orchestra, which is the broadcasting orchestra in South Korea. So basically, you've got 4 different regular orchestras. The one in Japan, the one in Germany, the one in South Korea, and the New Zealand one where you're honorary conductor. The mindset of those orchestras, is it easy to, I mean, I know you've had long relationships with them all, but is it easy to switch between them all? Are the mindsets similar? How they work, how they, put the concerts together? How easy is it to switch from one to another?
I mean, that's the thing. Also, you learn by doing.
Yes.
I mean, that's why I mean, obviously, I prefer these long relationships.
Yeah.
It's exciting in the beginning to run around and do a lot of things, different things, but still the best results come when you know each other well. The better you know, you continue. Even that Ludwigsburg job, even it's a festival orchestra.
Yeah.
Even we do couple programs during the festival, and then we don't see again for 9 months. But you really continue. Everybody remembers everything. You continue where you left off.
Yeah.
9 months before, and that's how you progress together and develop together your style and sound and so on. But yeah, I mean, a German radio orchestra compared to Japanese or a New World Orchestra, they are very different, and I enjoy that. I mean, how somehow a lot of things are becoming through this globalization sort of standardized in a way, and that's a bit of a shame. So I really vote for this to keep the, in a good sense, the traditions alive, and even if it's a younger ensemble, really create your strong own way of playing, an identity, and then that becomes the tradition there. And so I think these differences are important and good and worth to cherish. But yes, for us it means that, let's put it very, very simple example for a listener. Usually a New World Orchestra especially plays really on the beat. And you go with Bruckner Symphony to a German orchestra and give a similar beat, and the sound comes there, or down there. And that's a very, very different kind of a response. And you do sort of have to, in some ways, even modify your body language and technique to get out what you want, and vice versa. If the response is right on the spot in certain orchestras, and if you want that depth of sound, you also need to modify the other way to somehow, in some cases, even becoming just less clear, that it doesn't sound so vertical, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And the goal still for me is not to make all these orchestras sound the same, but to strengthen their strengths. And but yes, you have to adapt, and I find this sort of challenge just refreshing.
I think it's very interesting. I mean, before you get to the stage that you've been at, 5 years or more as a chief or a music director, which means that you've built that relationship. Before then, you often, as a conductor, might become a principal guest, or you might have a regular once a year slot. I'm in that position now, desperate really to get to a music director place. But what it means is you go back to orchestras every year, and you're so right in what you say, is that when I go to an orchestra, one of the many UK orchestras I go to every year, you remember how they play very quickly. And then I go to Trondheim and it's different, and then I go to WDR Funkhouse and it's different, and you have to adapt. But they've all got their strengths, and you want to play on their strengths and you want to build on their strengths. And as you say, if you go there regularly enough, it almost feels like, hey, remember me from last time? Yes, well, I remember what you're all about. We remember what you're, and then we carry on. It's very interesting, and I like what you're saying about where after the beat people play, because of course that's the one thing about guesting that's always frightening. Monday morning you walk out, the intendant or the chief executive introduces you. You say good morning, and you put a beat down, and you have no idea what or how or when it's going to come back.
It's going to come out, yeah.
Exactly. I have one side question actually, because I have been once to the KBS Symphony Orchestra in Korea, and myself and Ian Bostridge, the English tenor, we did a program of Handel arias. And when was that? I'm looking at a massive poster in my room, and I'm looking on it desperately for a date, and I cannot find the date.
Any idea how many years ago?
Oh, possibly 10. Yeah, I can tell you, the poster tells me that it was the 638th subscription concerts of the KBS Symphony Orchestra.
That helps me already a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
Somewhere at the because 7 is a lucky number. We just passed the 777.
Okay, right.
So somewhere we are roughly at 780 probably at the moment.
What I remember take away from that week particularly, and this has got nothing to do with the orchestra, it's to do with the audiences. I met Ian Bostridge on the second day or something like that, and he came in and we rehearsed the Handel arias together, and he said to me, "Have you worked here before?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, just be prepared. It's a really young, really vibrant audience. You know, coming from Europe where our age range of audiences are let's put it more on the graying side of on the hair, or even losing their hair." Over there, they were really young, very, very enthusiastic. I remember the concert at the in Seoul, particularly, how much they enjoyed the concert. How do you find those audiences? I mean, I'm assuming you love it as much as I did when I was there.
Phenomenal. It's the response, and now this our journey together with my new role there. It has been really enthusiastically followed and reported on, and I mean, of course, with during the pandemic, we had several restrictions. The last times now, Solar Center, we could only fill 75%, but with 2,600 seats, that's still a lot of people. When around the world there has been quite a different stories, 100 people allowed there and 200 there, or 50% there. So it was still the real deal every time. I even went once during the sort of the first lockdown period. I could go, and even then we had like 1,300 people, then 50%. And when you have 75, it's really for a whole like that, you get this volume back of the crowd, and it's really, especially after these studio productions only, and very limited number audiences there and there, then to see crowd like that again, I mean, it's also amazing.
And they're very supportive, very enthusiastic, very quiet when you're playing.
Absolutely super concentrated, but then they really show the appreciation when they really like it. It's quite amazing.
Now, with other conductors who have your schedule, and that's why I was interested to see where you were, and obviously home is Switzerland. With other people with your schedule, so you regularly have to go to Japan, Germany, South Korea, and New Zealand. How do you cope with the traveling? Do you have specific things? Do you try and do 2 or 3 weeks in a go in each place, so that you're not literally sitting on a plane every single week?
Obviously, that's the. I mean, the jet lag is really the only thing I would, if you could somehow eliminate this. I mean, time zones basically. I mean, if we could just travel up and down on a slice, I think that would make this job easier. And I think that somehow this changing the time zones all the time, it doesn't seem to become any easier with age or with experience. The only thing that the experience doesn't really help. Yes, you're right. I mean, this the main headache is with my agent to make it as smooth as possible, the schedule. And like now, I'm off to Bayreuth now for 3 months on Sunday, starting rehearsals next Tuesday there. So then I'm not moving basically from the Green Hill, not going down the hill to a shop and back up again. I also live right behind the Festspielhaus, so that's going to be the least travel ever again this summer. But then combining when the new season starts immediately in September again, I will then fly, do a couple of weeks with my German orchestra, go straight to Seoul. From there, Australia, Perth with Sydney Symphony now, first time in the new opera house after the renovation. I'm very excited to see that, how it's turned out. And then from there to Japan, and then back to Seoul, and then home. So that is basically just practically one jet lag trip. So that's how you maximize the minimize the strain on the body.
Well, I know how tiring it can be, but doing it that way, I suppose when you do 2 or 3 weeks in each place or 2 weeks in each place, you've got chance to sort of relax a little bit, and you're not, if you do a week here, a week there, it's absolutely crazy. Now you've just mentioned it. The question I've written down on my little book, dear listener, is opera, Bayreuth and beyond. I know you've done quite a lot of opera, and obviously you're going to be at Bayreuth for 3 months, which is a wonderful place. I went for the first time before the pandemic and absolutely loved it there. Do you try and do at least one production a year? That's down to you and your agent, but how do you try and fit it in with your 4 other commitments?
Correct. That's pretty much the maximum one can manage with several simultaneous jobs. Yeah. So if there was more opera in the future, sure, some of these jobs will have to go. That's the reality. I mean, new productions, it takes its time, and you should be there. One should be there as much as possible, and that would, I mean, if one day to be associated more closely or with the title in an opera house, then I think another symphonic job is the maximum you can have on top.
Yes.
That will still work. Still guest conducting will be very limited, but that's how most of us at the end of the day then sooner or later prefer to do it. Let's see.
Yeah, so you have your friends, and if you've got an opera house, of course, there's a lot more commitment, especially if you're in a German opera house and you become a GMD. Well, then that's...
you'll have to, it varies, but you'll be expected to conduct whatever, 40, 50 shows a year, couple premieres, some Wiederaufnahme. Yes, that's a big commitment, yes.
Yeah. Is it your first time at Bayreuth?
No, yes and no. I mean, so I conducted last year Valkyries there, and couple years before, visited first time. I mean, when it was clear, not announced yet, that I will be doing the new ring cycle. I spent some time in the pit, in rehearsals, in the auditorium, in rehearsals, performances as well, in the hall, in the pit, in performances, just to get an idea, because that special pit situation you cannot practice anywhere else.
No, well, that's why I asked. I mean,
very different, and you just have to get used to it.
Andres Nelson said he did the same when he knew he was going to go. Obviously, I knew Andres from his CBSO days, but he said he did the same. He went the year before and shadowed Christian Thielemann, I think, and just you get a feeling of what it sounds like.
He spent a lot of time there as well, just watching Thielemann's rehearsals, and that, I mean, it is a very unique situation. And historically, big names, Zolti, Karajan, many people have sort of struggled to come to terms with that. And Zolti didn't really find a way to. He wanted to tear off the cupola and it like, but of course, I mean, that's completely impossible.
No.
If the master wanted that way, you are not going to take it away.
No, if they're not going to put air conditioning in there, they're definitely not going to take away the cupola over the top of the pit, which deflects the sound, dear listener, onto the stage so that the singers can hear the orchestra a lot clearer. But what it means is that when you're in the auditorium, the sound is completely different from any other opera house. And whilst we're talking about air conditioning and keep it safe, what the master wants. When I was there, it was 35 degrees outside and 31 inside. It was just horrendously hot. But what an amazing place. I went and had a look at the pit. And just looked at it and thought, wow, this is the sort of place you really do need to go and experience before you conduct there, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So every minute you can spend on the podium there every minute you are a minute more experienced in that specific spot. It is very special, and it's, of course, it is the greatest honor to be one of these colleagues, to be allowed to sit in that chair. But it's a great responsibility. It is a challenging spot. Whole world looks. Great tradition there. This orchestra, many people played there decades, know every word, know these works inside out, back to front, and it's quite a special situation.
Yeah, the concertmaster of the WDR Funkhaus Orchestra, I'm sure he works in Bayreuth every single year. Juraj, his name is.
Juraj,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
Of course, he's been there for many years, yes.
Yeah, and he talks of it so fondly when I've spoken to him about it, and what a place, what a place. Yeah. There is an 11th question, which if you've not listened to any episodes, you won't know about, but it's the unwritten 11th question that every conductor has been asked. When you get a new score, what is your process for learning it? Do you go big and start big and go in small, or do you start at page 1 and work your way through? Do you use a piano? Do you not use a piano? And for the conducting geeks and students and myself, are you a scribbler of things in many colors, or marker pens or whatever else? Or are you, as I suspect, because, Jorma Panela has had an influence on you, are you somebody who writes less now? What's your process for learning a score?
That's a good question. Yes, very also geeky questions. So maybe let's say how to start. Yes, this bird eye view is the first thing. I first brand new thing, world premiere, obviously open the front page, scroll it through very quickly in a way to see the first impression of somehow the landscape. Are there many mountains, or it is very flat, or a lot of water, and like a pilot?
Yeah.
And very bright lights, or is it a night flight?
Yes, yeah.
That kind of thing. And then go again from beginning, quite often sitting on a piano already. In general, I put very little markings down. This kind of coloring things, I cannot stand that it is very disturbing for me to see 1,000 colors, even in a moment of learning something. I really want to see just really the music, some little markings, yes. But yes, on a piano, then going again from beginning to all the playing things and potentially spotting already mistakes, and usually in these situations, then also communicating with the composer. Also a great advantage, and even sometimes changing some things together. That is this sure what you want? What are you after there? And as a string player, often you can even can suggest some very specific things that might even lead to even an improvement. And did that answer all your questions?
It did answer all my questions. What's interesting about the podcast is the previous episode was with Roy Goodman, who worked with the Hanover Band, was very involved with historically informed performance. He was a user of many, many, many colors. Right. I use colors. I think the colored writers are slightly winning over 108 or 9 episodes. But the important thing is that it's very interesting that we all have our own method and it all works for us all individually. Your metaphor about the night flight or the view from a plane is very similar to one that Barry Wordsworth used many, many episodes, 70 odd episodes ago, where he said it's like arriving at a viewpoint. You get out of your car and the first thing you do is go, oh, nice view. There's some hills, there's some trees. Then you notice, oh, there's a little church down there. And then you notice, oh, there's a field full of cows here. Oh, there's a stream, there's a waterfall. And that's how he talked about learning the score. As you said, exactly like you, get the bigger picture and then zone in on the details. Sometimes even what flowers are growing in that field over there, and that's exactly it. So the reason why I asked the 11th question is, yes, there's a geeky element about pens and pencils, but also we all have our own way of doing it, and it's interesting to hear how you do it. And so there are elements of what you do that I've heard many times before, but then you're in a minority for not marking that much. But then I do remember Jorma panel are looking at my score for Shostakovich 1 and saying, "Oh, this is too many colors, this is not children's work. This is too many colors." Probably sprinkled with a few Finnish swear words and looking at me and saying, "What are you doing?" But because he barely wrote anything, he said, if you're guesting, you should only write the bare minimum in. And yeah, it's why I love the question.
Right. But yeah, I mean, whatever works for you. That's the point. Yeah.
Usually, at this point, some of you may be reaching for the little button that advances this episode on by 30 seconds, meaning that you may be missing interesting developments on my Patreon page. Over recent months, my Patreon page has expanded and is quickly becoming a great place for conductors and lovers of conducting to hang out. There's over 20 hours of interviews with musicians, composers, soloists and managers, as well as 20 bonus mini episodes that accompany this podcast. I've written an article on score marking, started a series of articles on the art of programming, and I'm about to start a new series on string playing for non-string playing conductors. And you can even have conducting lessons from myself. All of this is available at patreon.com/a mic on the podium. And from just £5 a month, which is less than a pint of beer in most cities, you can gain access to this ever-growing resource on conductors and conducting. Details and links to the page are in the show notes attached to this episode. Now, the all-important 10 questions with my guest, Pietari Inkinen. Pietari, it is time for the 10 questions that every conductor has answered since the first episode. And I always start with, what sound or noise do you love, and what sound or noise do you hate?
I mean, I do love a sound of a great orchestra.
Don't we all?
No, don't we all? But I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. The sound of Wagner with the Festspiel Orchestra.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't get much better than that.
No, it doesn't. No.
And what I hate, sound that I hate, in any type of elevator music.
Brilliant answer. I hate it.
Kind of slightly something disturbing in the background just to break this uncomfortable silence. But why couldn't there be a 13 seconds, even an uncomfortable silence in an elevator? Why do you need this thing?
and are you the same in restaurants? I hate music in the background of restaurants.
That is not quite as black and white situation. I mean, if you are in a very echoey, old, castle-y restaurant and it's very cleverly done just to break. Otherwise, you sound like in a big cafeteria and you hear every conversation. I mean, this kind of breaking the acoustical problem, that is a very other reason to use some sounds. And that's, but you get also, obviously, we get either irritated by such a thing or not, but when it's done very well, it also sticks out to me very clearly. I often wanted to ask them, who is doing actually this? Who is in charge? Who chooses exactly this and why? And it really works. I think in certain situations, this background music that we don't like, it is actually helpful.
Yes.
But quite often it's irritating.
I'm going to go back on your first answer and talk to you briefly again about Bayreuth and that orchestra. For those who don't know, that it is made up of players who regularly come from all over Germany, I'm assuming, but mainly from places like Bamberg and orchestras near to Bavaria. They are full. Well, the orchestra is full of Wagner enthusiasts. They go because they want to go and they want to play this stuff, which I think makes a difference to the sound. It's like if you stand in front of an orchestra and you play a great masterpiece that virtually everybody loves, the sound is different from something else. I mean, I would be right in assuming that, wouldn't I? I mean, that sound in Bayreuth is a specific sound full of people who absolutely love Wagner, probably know as much as you do about it, probably as geeky as you are and I are about it. They absolutely got Wagner obsessives.
Yes. I mean, you play your whole season at home and then you would have some time off, and then we go there at the hot year, sit there in 40 degrees in the pit and play these 6-hour operas. I mean that needs sort of you to be sort of passionate about it.
Yeah, absolutely, it does.
Oh boy, they are. So I mean, this kind of festival orchestra environment, it is completely unique. And yes, they are mostly from a great German orchestra from around Bavaria, but a lot of people from Berlin, Deutsche Oper, Staatsoper, Berliner Philharmoniker also. Some guests from across the borders as well, Zurich Opera, we had Paris Opera, but yes, it's mainly from the top German orchestras.
If you had 24 hours free, what would you spend it doing?
Maybe not in one go. This is a bit too demanding, but if I have a free day, downhill skiing was always my favorite hobby. Yeah. And our holiday home in Zermatt with the Matterhorn view, skiing on a great day, that is my favorite counterbalancing act to do.
Wow, what a place to have a holiday home near Zermatt. Wow, that's amazing. It's a wonderful part of the world. Absolutely love it. We were there a few years ago, driving back from Italy, back to the UK, and we went to Interlaken and did the Eiger and all of that. And what a wonderful part of the world. I've never skied. I always wished I had, but never have.
Yeah, that's I started very, very young already. Even in southern Finland, I mean, it's not very, very known for its mountains, but small hills we have, and it was a good place to learn downhill skiing at age 4 or 5, and now enjoy these great slopes here in Switzerland. It's rather wonderful.
Number 4, who would be your favorite conductor or conductors of yesteryear?
That's tricky. I mean, a little bit depends which repertoire.
Of course.
But if in general, who I really find always so exciting to listen to, then Carlos Kleiber.
Well, he's a very, very, very regular answer given to that.
But there is something really magic about this.
Yeah, there is. And often people will say, I'm sure loads of people have said Carlos Kleiber, so I won't say him and I'll give other answers. But
I don't mind.
No. Well, he was my answer back in episode 50 when I was interviewed for this podcast. Him and Nicholas Harnoncourt. But I mean, others have gone very repertoire specific, choosing Richard Strauss or Bruckner or whatever, Gunther Wandt for Bruckner. But I think Carlos Kleiber is probably the most oft repeated name. If Carlos Kleiber is a regular appearer for question 4, question 5 is somewhat different, Pietari. It is, who is your favorite current conductor? And again, that's been often repertoire led. Sometimes people have politely declined to answer, and one particular conductor refused to answer it. So who would be your favorite current conductor or conductors? You can have as many as you like.
It's also very, I never thought about it like that, to make now some ranking list of my own. I mean, it's a long silence.
But don't worry, I can cut the long silences out.
I can't really choose a favorite. It's somehow because it's again right on the doorstep again, this Bayreuth thing that somehow automatically pops into the head. Yeah, I mean, and I also spent some time, luckily enough, this handful of people who are still alive who have done the ring there. This is the first thing that came to my mind, that I last autumn also saw Daniel Barenboim again, and just to discuss about this unique situation there, and of course Tillemann is the guy who has the most experience there, has to be mentioned, and unfortunately Boulez, I could not have a chance to talk about it, but these are these few people that who know exactly what it is like, and they are very good at it. So maybe it makes sense to mention this these few names now.
Well, again, Daniel Barenboim has regularly appeared as an answer, often because he taught or they were assistants of him. Thielemann less so. A few people have mentioned his in specific repertoire, like Wagner and like Bruckner. And so, you know, that those are two very good answers, not surprising answers, given where you're about to go next week.
That they really have draw a great strength and power out of the music and the orchestra.
Yeah.
It's somehow in so many countries and so many orchestras going the exact opposite direction. Everything faster and exciting and lighter and fresher and non-vibrato this and more green that. These guys certainly don't fit into any of these tendencies. And I do rather listen their performances than a lot of these current trends.
Question 6. What is the hardest work you've ever conducted?
That is a very interesting question. And again, somehow not so black and white answer possible for me. No. I mean, again, going towards Wagner, if you are talking about stamina alone, physical and even mental strength, and sure, there is nothing that compares with the ring in so many ways, but to do that as originally intended, back-to-back nights, one day of the next, one day of the next, another day of the second cycle starts. That is marathon after marathon after marathon after marathon. It has its own demands. If you have a soloist that has a wild mind of their own,
the grin on your face, I knew exactly where you were going with that.
These can be stressful for 20, 30 minutes too. Sure, you have a modern score that it changes patterns every bar. We have all experienced these things too, and sometimes one could have written it out differently as well, and the sounding result for the listener would not have suffered at all. We have done this kind of sporty exercises as well. It's good to do, but certainly you can't lose your concentration. Otherwise, that's thing that you can make a false turn and the orchestra ends up in the water. So then you have to stay on the map. Yes, that's kind of can be challenging too. Yes, all these famous things, Rite of Spring was always the thing to test drive in the conducting class and finally walk on the stage first time ever to conduct in a performance. Of course, the first time for the famous places 104 and 142. Finally, the Dance Sacral is there for the first time with public. Sure, you get a little extra adrenaline. And it is tons of examples, but these days, after when it's performance and I don't know 55, then it already way before becomes just a pure joy when you know it's when anything you know well enough, then you can really start to enjoy it.
Well, there speaks a professional conductor who can tell us exactly the rehearsal numbers, 104 and 142 in the score of the Rite of Spring. I remember 142. That's the Dancer Chorale. I remember trying to put that off, conducting it until I'd really learnt it. And eventually I couldn't because somebody programmed it for a children's concert, I think, just the Dancer Chorale. And I had a month to learn it. But yeah, I mean, that absolutely... those are the things we have to go through. I laughed at you when you mentioned soloists because we've all been there, and it sometimes can be a piece of standard repertoire, and it's an old Norman Del Mar phrase that he used to say that it was like taking a jellyfish for a walk with a piece of elastic. Nothing is solid, nothing is ever stable. Everything is a struggle, and yeah, we've all been there with soloists, haven't we?
Yes, and even this can happen so. For many reasons and so unexpectedly that you have even worked very well together, and then someone gets for some reason a burst.
Yeah.
The orchestra can't necessarily, even we would stay on it. Not everybody can just immediately on the spot go along, and this is a kind of a musical nightmare.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's often then such a shame, but you just have to survive.
Yes. Well, what's interesting about both that answer, but especially your first one about the Wagner, is that there is no class, there is nothing in the world can prepare you for conducting Götterdämmerung, for instance. What is it, 5.5, 6 hours long? You know, especially if you've done the other 3 operas the 3 nights before, nobody can prepare you physically, but especially mentally for that level of concentration. And with the soloist answer, it doesn't matter how many times you have a soloist with a memory slip, or you have somebody who just has a flight of fantasy one night that nobody saw coming. You can't practice that. You just have to. You know, I equate it to, they say that what war is like, that the bullets fly at you, so they say slightly slower, and you know your whole world slows down. That's how I feel sometimes in those situations, and it's over in a flash. But you just think, oh my God, what do I do now? Yeah, but nobody can prepare you for any of this.
Yes, absolutely.
Number 7, when traveling abroad to conduct, what item could you not leave home without?
Especially when going to a new place, which happens, of course, these days much less than in the beginning of the career. But a good tool to spot a good restaurant in the city. That used to be something papery in the hand, and now it is turned into other forms. Or then even a phone number from a colleague to a friend already in the orchestra who is a specialist in, like in first time in Hong Kong Phil, no guide would ever take you there, and mobile phone these days will not help you either. Chinese guy, one of the concertmasters, he had already heard, and you would like some local food? Yes, very much. And he took with a couple of the other players me to a little garage. You open like a door, and there was like a 75-year-old grandmother with a wok pan and plastic chairs. This is his favorite spot.
Yeah.
He cooked this kind of home cooked meal. It was out of this world.
Wow.
So, contacts, good contacts, I would.
No,
whatever that.
Well, what's interesting about this is that, you know, as you said, in the old days, it would have been some sort of restaurant guidebook, paper. Nowadays, there will be an app. I mean, you know, TripAdvisor, for things like that, will rank the restaurants near where you are. You can even see them on a map and think, it'll give you directions, which is on your phone, which is a banned answer. But I will allow the answer, because actually that app has got me out of more trouble when I've gone on guest conducted. It really has.
However, for example, this TripAdvisor, you have no idea what is this background of these reviewers. This is like,
no, that's true.
Online, you have these experts, like, you know, like in this corona vaccination time. I mean, with what qualification everybody is an expert?
Yeah.
And someone gives 5-star review there and has never been to a restaurant in their life. How could you? I mean, you don't know this, and that is a problem. So I'm still looking for the ultimate tool, and that's why this locals recommending something. This is the only thing that I can trust, or a colleague that I know is a similar minded person. Then, but this actually it's a tricky thing. And okay, these Michelin stars or other points, this is another thing. Certainly, it's a quality guarantees a standard. These things too, but it's actually not so easy. I haven't found an ideal one tool for the world. So there is definitely room for that, but that means different things to different people. So I don't think we'll ever ideal app, let's say.
I think it's true. I mean, with TripAdvisor, I generally tend to read through the reviews, and if there is a common thing said about a specific dish, which everybody raves about, or a common thing said that people all complain about,
Yes,
that's the only thing I can
I
use.
understand.
Yeah,
But you already have to dig more deeply and
yeah.
study what these people are on
But
about. And
yeah, local recommendations, and that's the beauty of going somewhere for a second time is, if you know nobody in the orchestra the first time, the second time, or even the first time while you're there, if you get chatting to somebody in a coffee queue and talk about food, then you might get recommendations. Second time, often people say, "Oh, have you tried here, or have you tried there, or where do you eat after the rehearsals?" Or you get chatting. It does help an awful lot. It also means if you're a foodie, I'm really looking forward to the final question now, which is always my favorite question. So we'll get there in a minute. Number 8, real or fantasy, wherever you like. What is the one thing you would change about being a conductor?
I think we already spoke about it. Get rid of the time zones if you could. Travel up and down.
Travel up and down.
Finland, South Africa, whole world if it was on the one autobahn, north and south.
Yeah.
It would make our life easier.
Early on, it was a very common answer, and it then stopped appearing for a lot of the episodes. But actually, now the world is opening back up again after Corona. We are all getting back on planes again, and we are all going back to where we were. I mean, you are because of the orchestras you work with, and yeah, traveling is still not an enjoyable part of what we do.
Yeah, I mean, however, I mean, I have sometimes in the busy schedule when it's also getting worse than because they allow now the signal internet on planes, and people are talking and having meetings and whatever. But there used to be some of these very long travel also between New Zealand and Europe, and there were dead silence and a nice flat seat. I have slept sometimes better than anywhere else. Couple of these long haul trips that it was really the time to be just cut off the grid, right? And then but of course, when it's a I mean, this for some people maybe this New Zealand is also like a bucket list thing, but once you taking the flight there for the 40th time, I mean.
Yeah, the bucket seems less appealing, I would imagine.
The trip itself, I mean, yes, it is far, and yes, I would take the rocket plane in 2 hours to Sydney. Yes, I would take it, and sure that, but the point was that sometimes that you are really now cut off for this 13-hour flight. Stop again, just have a meal, shower, another 10-hour stint. It's about attitude. It's a time to do really rest, study, that nobody can bother you in a way that normally is the case. So it can be a nice thing too.
To disconnect, as what so I think that's what the modern phrase is.
Yeah.
Number 9, what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Yes, I mean we did further before mention that potential sporting career. Yes, maybe, but it's kind of now in a way boring to repeat.
And also, it is over before it's you're done by the time you're 35. Well, maybe 40 if you're Ronaldo.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. But the other thing that when I was young, what I was fascinated about was flying. So I mean, fighter pilot was sometime like tickling in my.
So a fighter pilot, not a commercial pilot.
Not a commercial pilot. Fighter pilot. I don't know why, but that was somehow I was fascinated when I was young about that. Heart surgeon was one other thing. That was, I mean, yes, we can we can bring joy and other things to people through art, but I mean, this is literally saving people's lives. I think this, and it's still super demanding, and I think that would have fit me also well.
Well, nothing there with low pressure, conducting's full of pressure, but yes.
There are many similarities. So that I think I would have, I don't know, enjoy is the wrong word, but I would have really done that job. And now, when the first lockdown came, also helping people and to do with flying. I mean, we spent a lot of time in the mountains when everything shut down. I was like, I think 1.5 months in Zermatt without leaving the place. And we see the Air Zermatt pilots, they do all sorts of things. But big thing is to save these climbers. I mean, and they are such a master pilots in quickly changing conditions next to a cliff, holding it steady, and the other colleague goes down and picks up the injured climber. I mean, chapeau, this is amazing job. And I was thinking, if someone told now that this is going to last for 10 years, this pandemic, I would probably have walked down there to El Zermatt. Can I enter the training, please?
Brilliant. So they're helicopter pilots, I'm assuming, are they?
Helicopter pilots. And I was lucky. Some friend in New Zealand times has his own helicopter. It's a bit fancy, but a kind of island hopping there and flying to a national park to have a barbecue and fly back in 5 minutes home. I mean, incredible. I mean, but now with this incredible machine to help people in the mountains, that could be a retirement job for me.
Brilliant choices. And finally, if the world were to end tonight, what would be your choice of final meal and drink?
Well, interesting question. Never thought about that. Sounds a little bit like I'm a death row inmate now.
Well, yeah, it's a sort of.
And well, okay, let's say that. Okay, let's imagine. So, yes, I mean, like many colleagues, we are lucky to have traveled the world and tried the many nice things, wine and food. This maybe then sounds a bit too decadent choice of wine, but however, I'm gonna say it. Burgundy is my great passion. We live not so far in Basel, visited many times the villages and went to pet the sacred grapes of Romane Conti. So if I could now choose, then let's say definitely a mature, maybe soon even a bit past the big 78 Romane Conti. And something then very simple. I mean, classic pairing would be with a bit stronger wine than, but however, I don't mind because it's the last meal, like you say. So simple steak à poivre with the Chavarac pepper, some very good French cream in the sauce, and obviously flambéed with a very good cognac with French butter. So it's actually French ingredients after all gonna be the final meal, but but the main star would be the Burgundy, great Burgundy wine.
What a great answer. The listener needs to know that we started this interview at 2:00 UK time, which meant that I had a choice. Did I have my lunch before I did the interview, or do I have my lunch afterwards? Well, I made the wrong choice because I'm sitting here now. My stomach is rumbling away because I'm starving hungry. And that answer's made me even hungrier. What a brilliant answer. And what a brilliant way to spend an hour or so. Thank you so much, Pietari, for our chat. And I hope in the future, maybe we won't be able to afford that particular wine, but it'd be nice to sit down over a steak and carry on chatting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed talking to you. Hope to see you soon.
A Mic on the Podium was devised and produced by Michael Seal, with music by Ben Dawson. Next time, I chat with the first Polish conductor to appear on the podcast. After studying in Warsaw and Vienna, she went on to be both a Taki Allsop Conducting Fellow and a Dudamel Fellow. and last year started as the music director of Opéra Nationale de Lorraine in France. But until then, bye-bye.